Hello and welcome. This video is recorded as a summary of the Golf Handicap app that I built in Android Studio. This was done for a project, Concordia University, Wisconsin for CSC 491. So this course asks that we build a project, and we had a choice of project. In this case, I took the Golf Scorecard app. So this was an app used to calculate handicaps for golf players. It's often really a time-consuming process, error-prone. Takes away from time playing the game. Really, time that you should be spent enjoying with your friends or your family playing golf. Um, so with this app, I took this one on because I'm not a golf player myself, but I did want to become a little bit more familiar with the scoring and how that is calculated. So starting this project, going into it, I thought this would be a little bit easier than it was. I kind of figured this would be a matter of pulling some information together, some data together, and displaying it. But there are quite a few variables that I found out. First time working with Android Studio as well. So this was definitely a good crash course for me. I really enjoyed the process. Maybe after watching this video, you will too. Um, I also give some pointers at the end of the video, some places, some things that you could do to help you get started a little bit easier. As we go through, I'll kind of note some of the points in the code that I think are especially helpful that you could watch and reuse on your own. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, this is Golf Scorecard app, automatic scoring solution for golf. We can open up Android Studio right away. On the left, I have the project directory. So here I have the Java classes that I use. So each of these classes relates to an activity within the app, starting with the main activity and working my way down. Below that, I have the drawable XMLs. So several of these are just for the cell design for the tables that I used. You'll notice those. And then I also have some of the layout resource files, the XMLs, for each activity. So when we open a screen, how does that screen look? What's included in it? That's all defined in these layout resource files. I also have a couple down here, drop down, select course. These are used for displaying how the drop-down menus will look, but we'll get to that shortly. So become familiar with this right away as you start to use Android Studio. Do a couple of practice rounds, set up a few activities, play around with constraint layout, relative layout, really get a handle on what's going on with each one of those. I use relative layout a lot in this. I know constraint is very popular too. So this project list here, we can kind of go through that as we use the app. I also wanted to point out this XML file. So when I started, I wasn't paying enough attention to this and I ran into quite a few problems. So be sure that you read up on the Android manifest and what that's used for. You can see here activity, activity, activity. So these are all my activities called out in the manifest. Really basic what I'm doing with them. But the most important one is definitely the name and then the parent name if you're going to use a navigation toolbar. So let's go ahead. Let's start it up. I'll go right into let's open up one of the activities right away. Let's go activity, main activity. So this is what the user is going to be greeted with. This is the welcome screen. This is a place where I'd like to add some user login in the future. If somebody's taking this project over, this would be a great place to start, would be to get login access. So kind of protect the databases that are in the app, protect some of the data that's in there by registering and then logging in. But otherwise, pretty simple. This is just welcome golfers and start a round. So if you look at that main activity, again, very simple because it is simple, this screen. We're just calling out this button, get players, which is going to take us to the players selection screen. And then we have a function here, set on click listener for the players.class. So we just wait for that button to be clicked, and then we're working our way into the player selection screen. So let's open that up too. Activity players. So here we go. This is our layout for the player selection. So at the top we have a drop-down menu, player selection. So this is our list of existing players. And then below that we have options to add the player to the current game, which would add them down here under where it says player add required. Or we also have an option to to create a player, a new player. So when we create a player, we're going to need the first name, last name, and their current handicap. We need a starting point for the handicaps. And I also have just some really basic instructions in the middle of the screen. In the future, too, next iteration of this project, I think it would be nice to clean this up a little bit. Some of that text is a little bit small, might not be completely clear what to do. With being as simple as it is, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but this view could use a little bit of work. So activity players, let's look at the code for that. So under players class, we have the onCreate method here. Action bar, this is to go backwards in the app, is really what I did. So just to kind of navigate for the user, that puts a kind of a header at the top with a back button. Here we're just calling out those the layout files here, the text views, edit views, things like that are called out here. Below that, we are calling out our golfer database. So that's our first instance of the database usage in this app. We have a golfer DB and we have a course DB. So you'll see those called out a little bit in this video. Below that, we have our first function call, refresh player menu. That's going to keep that menu refreshed, that drop-down menu. So here, that basically sets up a cursor, goes through the golfer's table, and we look for names in that table. So for this menu, it'll just take the first and last name, bring them together, and we'll have that displayed. So using the cursor was a big part of this project too, so get familiar with using a cursor to search through a database. That's very important for the Golf Handicap app. Down here, we kind of have a custom spinner menu. So I wanted to try taking on like a custom drop-down menu. This is how I did that, which uses that select golfer resource file that we looked at earlier over here, select golfer. So in this activity, we'll just run through these functions really quick, these on-click listeners. So here, when we add, we're incrementing our player count. So we have to have a minimum of one player in order to play a game of golf. So that's what this is keeping track of. For this, we have a maximum of 4 players per game. So each time you add a golfer, it's going to increment that player count. So you click add, set on click listener. First thing it does is increment the player count. We're also taking the string we're getting from our spinner drop-down menu to string, and then we're using that to search here. So golfer's first name or last name, and we've got the handicaps. So here we go. So active handicap.add. So this is where we're grabbing the handicap of that player. So we look for that first or last name. This really should be an and, but moving forward, this will grab that player's handicap when it finds them. Here we're checking the player count. So if we have too many players in the game, we're going to reject that add. So that's what this does. Create player, we're going to set some views visible so that we can input data, and then when we save, we're going to save. So this is a pretty big part of the players class. So here we're just getting from our text views the strings. We're making sure that they're not empty because we can't add something that's empty. And then we have our golfer DB. So we'll be calling that, and or we'll be writing to that, I'm sorry. So that's really what this activity is about, is establishing the players that are going to be in this game. So looking at this, we'll run through the app in a minute, but just again, we drop down menu, create player, add player, and then the current players. So when we select next on click listener, we're packaging the active players and the active handicap array lists that we established, and we're moving that over to the course. So we're just handing that information off to the course class. So let's open that up. So activity course, very similar. We've got a drop-down menu of existing courses, option to add new, or option to create new, option to add the current course in the drop-down to the game. So very similar. We'll save going through that, and we'll just go right back over to course.java. So here is where I have my onCreate. I've got database access for CourseDB instead of GolferDB, and then I have the same refresh function that keeps that course database, or I'm sorry, that course drop-down menu refreshed. This is how I'm passing the information. So here's where I'm taking it in. So in players, we passed it. Intent, get intent. That is when we grab that data that we passed from players. And then we have an on-click listener too. We have a couple of those as well. Here we have the add. So when we add a course, we increment that course count. So same thing. We can't have more than one course. We can't have less than one. We need one course to play the game. So keeping track of that, and we're just putting that under game course, which is displayed on the screen. So, and then we have the create. So I'm actually passing the player info to the course input. We'll get to that screen in a second, but this is where we're doing the creating of a course. So moving on, once we do the player add and the course add, we have enough to start a round. So moving into the start round, let's open up the start round activity. That's here. So here's our golf scorecard. Title at the top. We've got the course, the rating, and the slope. And then we've got a scorecard with holes on the left, a par column, so the par for that course, or for that hole. And then we also have the difficulty. So 1 through 18, how difficult is that hole? So 1 being the hardest hole, 18 being the easiest. The next column, this will hold the handicap. So per hole handicap. So how many strokes do I get to subtract from my score on a per hole basis for A, B, C, and D players 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's what that column's for. And then A, B, C, and D, those are my players who are shown at the bottom too. Those will be displayed. A is player 1, B is player 2, etc., etc. So this is the main screen that the user is going to be viewing when they use this app. They're going to be using that scorecard. So if we go to start round, we'll walk through this as well very quickly. Here we have our onCreate. We're using both databases in this case. And we've got all of our array lists now. We've got the players, the handicaps, the pars, difficulty, course rating, course slope. So we're bringing everything together in this activity, and this is where this is all being brought in right here under this intent. I'm also using a bundle to bring in some of the course rating, slope, and holes. Instances where I don't have an array list or several values, I'm just using the bundle. Here's the function calls here for this activity. So in order, it's going to fill the players, then it's going to fill the course, and then it's going to add the rating and slope. And then here we're going to do pars, difficulties, and then we're going to get course handicaps. So for my app at this point, I'm just using the course handicap. The per hole handicap is not yet working, but it will calculate based off of the rating and slope what your score should be at the end, or what your adjusted score can be at the end. So per hole handicap needs work, but course handicap is working. This is a very helpful way to make sure that you have the data in the activity. So if you're developing and your app is just crashing, this is a really good way to see why. There's also Logcat. Logcat will show you exactly what's going on at each step. I use this, and then I use the test host to kind of see where I'm losing data. So I might invalidate a method call like I did here, or a function call, and then I might just make sure I have the data first. So moving on, the first thing is a get score. So this is going to initiate the tally results function. So whenever I want to get the score, I'm just going to hit get scores button, and it's going to tally up what I have at this time. Another nice thing with this app would be to make this dynamically add the scores. It is not doing that right now, but in the next iteration, I think when you add a value and you leave that edit text, or you accept that value, it really should dynamically add that score to the running total. This is the finish game button. So once you have all of your scores entered, you'll push finish game button, and it'll package up the data in that scorecard, and it'll send it over to the complete game Java class. So that's what this is doing here. Same thing, intents and bundles for that data. Things get a little bit interesting down here. Fill players is a little bit rudimentary, but it does work. So depending on the players that you have in the game, it'll fill those in. So if you only have one player, it's not going to show you the fields for the others. Whereas if you have all four, they're all going to be visible, and it's going to pull that data in. So making sure data is not null when you're using it is very important in Android Studio development. So a lot of these things like this, it might look a little bit odd, but it does serve a purpose. Fill course, this is very easy. Same with game rating and, the game rating slope, which is the combination of rating and slope. So these, I'm just pulling in data, displaying it for the user. We are using that course rating and course slope for the calculation, so it's important to have those in the activity. Fill pars. So this is one of the hardest things that I came across during this project was, how do I iterate through text views? So if I want to go from text view 1 to text view 2 and fill data, I can't call text view 1 in the loop. I have to come up with some other way to do it. So this was really a helpful way, was to set up an integer array of the text views. This really got the job done in a lot of situations. It's reused several times across the application. So here, like for the pars, so for par hole 1 through par hole 18, I'm calling those out in par array, integer par array. And then here I'm assigning kind of a temporary text view, and then I'm setting the text to the value that's associated with in the active pars array list. So if I have hole 1, that would be active pars get 0. I assign that to that text view, which is associated with the ID par hole 1. So that's how I'm filling the pars. At the end, for the all pars, this is an addition of all the pars together to get the score for the whole, the total pars for that course. Fill difficulties. So when we add a new course, or when we grab a course from the existing list, each hole will have a difficulty 1 to 18. This is where we're filling those from the active diffs array list. So very similar, these two, fill pars, fill diffs, but this, I believe, is probably the best way I can think of to do those two things, to step through text views and add to them. Course handicaps. So here, kind of the same thing, just doing the integer array of size text views. So if I have 4 fields to fill in, I'm going to have an integer array of size 4. Tally results. This is going to be the total results for the game. So basically tallying up the scores. So each time we do call this function from 2 locations in this activity. So it's important that we zero these out before we run. So that's where these zeros are coming from. And then we're doing the same thing. We're doing that integer array of size number of text views. So we do that 4 times, one for each player column. So I think it's time to do a sample run of the app and just see how things go and see if we can get this to score. So when we run the app, we are greeted with the welcome screen, Golf Handicap app right here. So we can see what app we're using. We can clearly see where we need to go. So let's start around. Our drop-down menu currently has the first item in it. So these are my existing golfers. When we create a new golfer, they'll be added to this list. So let's go ahead and let's just add one. We're going to do Ronald McDonald. You may have heard of him. We'll do handicap of 15 for Ronald, and we're going to save new player to list right here. So let's save him. We've got our player add successful, and we should be able to see Ronald right here in the list. So we can take any one of these players and add them to the game. Let's add Ronald. Let's add the course instructor. Let's add myself. And then let's also add Richard Simmons, another fantastic golfer. So we have these 4 players. We can go ahead and get our course now. So you notice this button showed up once we had more than 1 player. So minimum 1 player to advance in the app. So here's our courses. We have a few courses already. We'll select one of these when we play. But the create course, so it says we need to add one here or we can create. So when we do a create course, we're actually going to another activity, unlike the player add. There's just too much information to put that all on one screen. So we enter this information in, course name, rating, slope, number of holes. So if we have 9 holes, we're going to see 9. If we have 18 holes, we're going to see 18. It just shows you what you need to see. So we can add that and then hit save course. In this case, we're going to go to cancel, and we're just going to grab an existing course here. Okay. So we're grabbing the Evergreens course, and we're going to do add course. So now we have our add course, and we can start the round. Let's go ahead and go in. Okay, so it pulled that course data in. So we've got Evergreens, which had a rating of 79, a slope of 77. Here's the par values for each hole, and then this is the difficulty. So 1 through 18, how difficult are these holes? So that's what this information is here. So if we want to start playing golf, we can start adding some scores here, and we can see as we add them, I'll add a few here. So we can see in the out it's not adding. So dynamic add is something that we do want to add on the next iteration of this project. But if I just hit the get scores, I will see those values show up. So you can play this whole course or you can play part of it. It doesn't matter. The point is that it's flexible. So you don't have to play the entire course to score it. But here you can see each time I hit that I'm getting an updated total. So sum of all pars, sum of all scores. When we're ready to finish, I mean, we can fill this entire thing in, but in the interest of time, I think we'll just take the scores that we have and we'll finish the game. So this is the screen that you'll see at the end. So player 1 results, 2, 3, 4. So here's our options at the bottom. We can save and finish to the database. So this would be to modify the current handicap for that player. So if I had a handicap of 20 and I shot really well, I might go down to a 19. Discard and finish is generally just for practice play, or if you just want to throw the round away. You don't want to save this. You had a really bad round and you don't want to be saving it. So discard and finish, that'll take us back where we can start adding course data again. So really with this app, the most important thing is for me was to understand that when we go into this to really do a good specification. So you know the requirements of the app, but do you have the specifications? Did you really go through and figure out what technologies are going to be used on each step? Or did you just kind of go and start programming right away? So I did do that a little bit. Looking back, it would have been a lot better to kind of figure out how I want to accomplish task 1, task 2, task 3. We should look at the databases quick too before I forget. These are the columns for those right here. So like for database courses, at the top I have all my columns. So the pars, the difficulty, how I'm using those on how I'm creating the table. So this is my courses table. Here, if it exists already, we're going to drop it and create a new one. That's what this is here. I also have database golfers. Regarding the technologies that I use in this app, I decided to use MySQL. So when I was working with that, I needed a way to view that information while I was working on it. I used the browser DB in order to do that. So I can get my database here. So when I go into Device Explorer, if I go Data, Data, and then I found my way down to my app, Golf Handicap app, and I go under Databases. Let me refresh this too. There we go. So now I have both databases. So in many cases, I wanted to view this information. So I can just do a save as on my course DB. Let's pick a location. We're just going to I'll go to Documents, and we'll save that there. So if I run over and I go into my documents, I can find my golfer DB, and I can save that. Let's just put that on the desktop. And if I go to the desktop, I can open up Browser DB, and I can bring in my course DB if I can find it. Okay, well, let's try that again. Let's go back in here. Let's just go back to okay, let's try that again. There it is. So now I can pull this into my browser DB, and there is my data for my course. So I can add here or I can delete here, but the important thing is that I have a tool for handling my databases outside of the Android Studio app. So back to the app, I've got a pretty good way to handle databases. I have a pretty good way to get through my activities. What were the shortcomings in the app? The biggest thing was the actual calculation on a per hole basis. So if I go back to the start round XML, you'll recall that I have this. So the plan here is to have an array list in here. So I'll have those 4 players. I'll have how many holes they can, or how many strokes they can subtract per hole shown here. I will look at doing a handicap column for each player, but I don't really want to rotate the screen, and I am running out of space. So I think with this, the biggest thing is to just get this working inside of this column. So player A would be the first one, player B would be the second. So that is not working right now. Neither is the right to the golfer database at the end. What is working is the course handicap. So on a per handicap hole, or on a per course basis, I should say, I can calculate the handicap per player. So what you should be, what you can score, I should say, it's to still shoot under par. So that is really a summary of where I'm at right now. There is a document that I have available which details some of the ads that I will link to the video as well. But for now, I think that's pretty good summary of the app, how I went about doing things, which activities I used. I've shown you the screens for each of the activities. I've used some of the custom cells and the custom drop-down menus as well. So going into this, make sure that you have a good idea of what you want each activity to look at, and then put them in, make an activity for each one. Start with the layout resource file, create your layout on each activity, which text boxes, which ones are just going to be views, which ones are going to be edits, that sort of thing. So if I would go back and do this again, that's how I would do it. I would do activities first, then I would work on the Java classes for each one. So thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate any feedback. Have a good day.